You know, when you get to be my age, 65 years old, with more grey hair than I care to count, you start thinking about the moments that changed everything, the pivots, the crossroads. I'm sitting here in my workshop right now, surrounded by half-finished projects and the smell of sawdust, and my mind keeps drifting back to the summer of 1978. I was 19 years old, barely shaving twice a week, and I was about to walk into a situation that would define the rest of my life. Before I get into the whole mess, let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like you were walking into a trap, like every step you took was leading you closer to some inevitable disaster? That's exactly how I felt that humid July evening, driving my beat-up Chevy truck toward the Rivera estate on the outskirts of São Paulo. My girlfriend at the time, Camila, had been preparing me for weeks. Her family was different, she kept saying. Old money, traditional. Her father owned textile factories across 3 states. Her mother came from coffee plantation aristocracy, and me, I was the son of a carpenter, learning the trade from my father in a small workshop in Santo Amaro. I worked with my hands. I got splinters. I smelled like varnish and wood shavings most days. To them, I might as well have been from another planet. Camilla had called me that morning, her voice tight with anxiety that made my stomach knot up. "Felipe, please," she had begged. "When Papa asks what you do, you tell him you're studying furniture design and business management. You don't say you're a carpenter's apprentice. And please, please, wear the nice shirt I bought you. Keep your hands in your pockets if you can. Don't let them see the calluses." I had tried to joke about it. "Mila, I am a carpenter. It's honest work. My father built half the custom cabinets in the best houses in this city," but she had started crying, and that killed me. "I know, Felipe, I know, and I love that about you. But they won't understand. Just for tonight, just pretend to be someone they can accept, please, for me." So I had agreed. I scrubbed my hands until they were raw, trying to get the wood stain out from under my nails. I put on the expensive white shirt she had given me for my birthday, the one that felt stiff and uncomfortable. I even borrowed my uncle's car, a slightly less embarrassing Ford Galaxy, because I knew my truck with the tools rattling in the back would be the wrong image. The drive out of the city and into the countryside took nearly an hour. The neighborhoods changed gradually. Dense urban sprawl gave way to gated communities, then to vast properties with high walls and security guards. I checked the address 3 times. I was going to be exactly on time, maybe even 5 minutes early, a small victory in what I knew was going to be an uphill battle. Then I saw her. She was standing beside a cream-colored Mercedes-Benz sedan, the hood propped open, steam rising from the engine like smoke signals of distress. She was perhaps 70 years old, dressed in an elegant floral dress with pearls around her neck, looking at the hissing engine with an expression of refined annoyance. Everything in me said, "Keep driving. You're already nervous. You can't be late, this isn't your problem." But my father had raised me better than that. He always said that a man's character shows in what he does when no one's watching, when there's nothing in it for him. With a resigned sigh at my own inability to just mind my own business, I pulled over and got out. "Good evening, Senora," I called out, trying not to startle her. "Are you having trouble?" She turned to look at me, her eyes sharp and intelligent behind gold-rimmed glasses. "The car just stopped," she said, her Portuguese crisp and formal, the accent of someone educated in Swiss boarding schools. "Started making terrible noises, and then this smoke. My driver was supposed to follow in the other car, but he seems to have gotten lost somewhere between the city and here. Would you mind if I took a look?" I asked. "I know a bit about engines." She studied me for a moment, taking in my nice shirt and pressed pants, then nodded. "Please, if you can help, I would be most grateful." I leaned under the hood, and immediately I was in my element. This was a beautiful machine, German engineering from the late 60s. The problem revealed itself quickly. A burst radiator hose, classic overheating issue. "This is going to take some work," I told her honestly. The radiator hose has split. I can patch it temporarily, but it's going to get messy. I'll need about 30, maybe 40 minutes. She smiled then, a real smile that reached her eyes. Young man, if you can get this car running again, I don't care if you have to take the entire engine apart on the side of the road. So I went to work. I retrieved my emergency toolkit from the trunk, the one I always kept because you never knew when you'd need it. I found some duct tape and wire. I got down on the ground, feeling the gravel dig into my knees, and I started working. My nice white shirt was soon streaked with black coolant and road dirt. My hands, which I had scrubbed so carefully, were covered in grime. As I worked, we talked. She didn't ask me about my education or my prospects. She asked me about the car. How did I know what was wrong? Had I learned this from my father? Did I enjoy working with my hands? Her questions were genuine, curious. She seemed fascinated by the practical knowledge I had, the kind of knowledge that came from actually doing things rather than just studying them. When I finally finished the repair and cleaned up as best I could with the old rag from my kit, I told her to try starting it. She got in, turned the key, and the engine purred to life, smooth and strong. The relief and joy on her face was worth everything. "Young man, you are a miracle worker," she exclaimed through the open window. "How much do I owe you?" "Nothing, Senora," I said, my heart full despite the disaster I knew was coming. "Just seeing it run again is payment enough. You have a safe evening." She looked at me for a long moment, something unreadable in her expression. "You are a rare kind of young man," she said softly. "The world needs more people like you." Then she put the car in gear and drove off, leaving me standing there on the side of the road. That's when I looked at my watch and felt my heart drop into my stomach. I was 50 minutes late. The dinner had started at 7. It was now 7:50. I looked down at myself. My borrowed shirt was ruined, streaked with black coolant stains and road dust. My hands looked like I had been working in a coal mine. My pants had grease smudges on both knees. I was a disaster. The last 10 minutes of that drive were torture. I rehearsed what I would say. "I am so incredibly sorry. There was an emergency, an elderly woman, a broken car." Even to my own ears it sounded ridiculous, like an excuse a teenager would invent for missing curfew. These were not people who would appreciate the nuances of automotive repair. These were people who valued punctuality and appearances above all else. The Rivera estate was announced by 2 massive iron gates, already open, with a guardhouse where a uniformed security man waved me through without interest. The driveway was paved with imported stone, winding through gardens so perfect they looked artificial, lit by elegant lampposts every 20 meters. The house appeared gradually through the trees, and when it finally came into full view, I almost stopped the car. It wasn't a house. It was a monument. 3 stories of colonial architecture, painted a pristine white with dark green shutters, columns holding up a grand entrance portico, balconies with ornate iron railings, and enough windows to light up half the neighborhood. I parked next to a row of luxury cars that made my uncle's Ford look like a toy. For a long minute, I just sat there, my hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to steady my breathing. This was a mistake. This was all a terrible mistake. But I loved Camilla. I loved her laugh, her kindness, the way she saw good in everyone. So I got out of the car and walked toward that imposing front door like a man walking to his own execution. I rang the bell. The sound echoed somewhere deep in the house, a melodious chime that probably cost more than my father made in a month. The door opened, and there was Camilla. The hope and excitement I had seen in her eyes that morning were gone, replaced by pure horror. "Felipe," she whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh, God, what happened to you? You're covered in filth. I tried calling you. Where were you?" "I'm so sorry, Mila," I started. There was this senora on the road. Her car broke down. I had to help, but I never got to finish. Two figures appeared behind her, emerging from the hallway like judges entering a courtroom. Her parents, Augusto and Helena Rivera. He was tall and severe, his salt and pepper hair slicked back, wearing a dark suit that probably cost more than every piece of clothing I owned combined. His face was all hard angles and cold disapproval. She was thin and elegant, her hair an unnaturally perfect shade of mahogany, diamonds glittering at her throat and ears. The look she gave me was one of physical disgust, like I was something unpleasant she had discovered on the bottom of her shoe. They looked at their daughter's horrified face, then at me, and their expressions hardened into something beyond mere disappointment. It was contempt, pure, aristocratic contempt. "So," Augusto Rivera said, his voice a low rumble of barely controlled anger, "this is him, the carpenter." "Mr. Rivera," I began, my carefully prepared speech dissolving into stammering nonsense. I apologized profusely for my lateness. There was a woman on the road whose car had broken down, and I felt obligated to stop and help her, and I lost track of time, and I'm sorry. He held up one hand, silencing me instantly. "We do not make excuses in this family, young man. We honor our commitments. Punctuality is not optional. It is the bare minimum of respect, a minimum you have clearly failed to meet." Then Helena stepped forward, her eyes raking over my appearance with undisguised revulsion. "And clearly," she said, her voice like poisoned honey, "you also don't understand the concept of appropriate presentation. This is how you present yourself for dinner in our home? Looking like you've been working in a garage." Camilla's voice was small, desperate. "Mama, please, he helped someone. He was being kind." "Kindness," her mother snapped, her eyes never leaving me, "does not excuse disrespect. And it certainly doesn't excuse appearing in our home looking like common labor." I just stood there, speechless. Every defense I might have offered died in my throat. I had lost before I had even begun. "I think it's best," Augusto said, turning his back on me in a gesture of final dismissal. "If this visit is rescheduled for a time when your friend can present himself with the dignity we expect. Camilla, please show him out." The defeat was crushing. I had failed her. I had failed myself. I looked at Camilla, tears now streaming down her face, and I wanted to say something, anything. But what was there to say? I turned toward the door, toward the darkness and the long drive home and the end of everything I had hoped for. That's when I heard it. The sound of tires on gravel. Then the distinctive purr of a well-tuned Mercedes engine. Headlights swept across the front of the house, illuminating all of us standing frozen on that grand portico. I knew that engine sound. I knew that car. The cream-colored Mercedes sedan rolled to a gentle stop behind the line of cars in the driveway. For a moment, no one moved. Augusto and Helena Rivera stared at the unexpected arrival with annoyance. Camilla just looked confused, her tears still wet on her cheeks. A man in a driver's uniform got out and moved to open the rear passenger door. A hand emerged first, delicate and aged, adorned with an enormous emerald ring. Then slowly, carefully, the woman I had helped climbed out of the car. It was her. Helena Rivera spoke first, her voice rising in pitch with surprise and irritation. "Mother, what are you doing here? I thought you were staying in the city tonight. We were expecting you tomorrow." The woman, who I now understood was Donna Beatriz Rivera, the matriarch of the family and Camilla's grandmother, completely ignored her daughter. Her sharp eyes, the same warm brown eyes that had watched me work with such interest, scanned the scene. She took in her son-in-law's rigid posture, her daughter's flustered expression, Camilla's tear-streaked face. And finally, my disheveled, stained appearance. She began walking toward us, her steps slow but purposeful, leaning slightly on an elegant wooden cane. The air seemed to change around her, to sharpen with authority. Augusto and Helena, who moments before had been the absolute rulers of this domain, suddenly looked like children caught misbehaving. Donna Beatriz stopped directly in front of me at the bottom of the steps. She looked me up and down, her gaze lingering on my ruined shirt, my dirty hands, my stained knees. A lesser person would have withered under that examination, but her eyes held no judgment. They held recognition. Then a slow smile spread across her face, warm and knowing. "Augusto," she said, not taking her eyes off me. "Helena, this young man whom you appear to be in the process of ejecting from your home just spent nearly an hour on the side of a dark country road repairing my car after it broke down. He ruined his clothes, made himself late for what he clearly knew was a very important dinner, and refused to accept any payment for his trouble." Augusto found his voice, though it was uncertain. "Mother, we didn't know. He arrived almost an hour late, and he looks like he's been rolling in the dirt. We have standards in this house." Donna Beatriz turned to face her son-in-law, and the warmth in her expression vanished, replaced by cold steel. "Standards," she repeated, the word sharp as a knife. "What standards are those, Augusto? The standard of judging a man by the cleanliness of his shirt rather than the content of his character. The standard of valuing punctuality over compassion." She looked at her daughter. "Helena, when did this family become so small, so petty?" She turned back to me, and the warmth returned to her face. "You have my deepest gratitude, young man. What is your name?" "Felipe, Senora," I managed. "Felipe Santos." "Well, Felipe Santos, you possess both skill and integrity, two qualities that have become remarkably rare." She looked at Camilla, who was staring at her grandmother with dawning hope and wonder. "And you must be my granddaughter's young man. She has spoken of you, though she didn't mention you were so capable." Then Donna Beatriz did something that changed everything. She took my arm, her grip surprisingly firm, a public gesture of alliance and approval. "Come along, Felipe," she said, her voice carrying clearly in the evening air. "You will join me for dinner." I walked up those steps, not as an unwanted intruder, but as an honored guest on the arm of the one person whose word in this family was law. The interrogation I had dreaded was over, but as I glanced back at the pale, shocked faces of Augusto and Helena Rivera, I realized a different kind of reckoning was just beginning, and they were the ones who would face judgment. The interior of the Rivera mansion was everything I had imagined and worse. The foyer alone was larger than my family's entire house, with marble floors that echoed with every footstep, a crystal chandelier that cast rainbow prisms across the walls, and a grand staircase that curved upward like something from a movie. A butler, his expression professionally neutral despite my appearance, took Donna Beatriz's shawl. "Donna Beatriz," he said with a small bow, "shall I set another place at the table?" "Yes, Carlos, for Señor Felipe Santos, at my right hand." The butler's eyebrows rose almost imperceptibly. Camilla's father had been sitting at that position, the place of honor, for years. That is, his expression said without words, going to cause problems. We were followed into the house by Helena and Augusto, silent and shell-shocked, and by Camilla, whose face was now glowing with barely suppressed joy and vindication. The dining room was absurdly grand, with a table long enough to seat 20 people, though only 6 places were set. The walls were lined with oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors. The silverware alone probably cost more than my father's truck. Donna Beatriz guided me to the seat of honor at her right, while Camilla was directed to sit directly across from me. Augusto was relegated to the far end of the table, a visible demotion that made his jaw tighten. What followed was the strangest, most nerve-wracking, and ultimately most satisfying meal of my entire young life. It wasn't just dinner, it was theater. It was a lesson. It was a quiet, systematic dismantling of prejudice. Donna Beatrice ignored her own children almost completely. Her attention was focused entirely on me. She didn't ask me about my prospects or my family's connections or my education. She asked me about my work. "So, Felipe," she began after the first course had been served, a cold soup that I tried not to spill. "You said you learned about engines from your father." "Actually, Senora," I corrected gently, "my father is a carpenter. I learned about engines from my uncle, but my real passion is woodworking. I'm learning to make custom furniture." Her eyes lit up with genuine interest. "Woodworking? Now that is a true craft. Tell me, what kind of work do you do?" And so I did. I told her about the dining table I was building for a client, how I was hand-selecting each piece of jacaranda wood for grain and color. I talked about the satisfaction of taking a rough plank and transforming it into something beautiful and useful. I spoke about learning to read the wood, to understand how it wanted to be shaped. I didn't speak as an uneducated laborer. I spoke as an artisan, as someone who loved his craft with passion and pride. At one point, Augusto, unable to bear his irrelevance any longer, tried to redirect the conversation. "Speaking of investments, Mother," he said loudly, "I've been looking into diversifying the company portfolio. The real estate market in São Paulo is showing promising returns." Donna Beatriz held up one hand without even looking at him. "Augusto, please. We are discussing the creation of actual, tangible beauty. Your real estate portfolio can wait. Felipe is describing the art of making something with his own two hands, something that will last for generations. A concept that seems to have been forgotten in this family." The slap, delivered so calmly and precisely, made Augusto's face flush red. He said nothing else for the next hour. Later, Helena tried to regain some ground, her voice artificially bright. "Mother, you simply must try this wine. Augusto had it imported specially from France. It cost nearly 2,000 cruzeiros per bottle." Donna Beatriz took a sip, swallowed, and then looked at me. "It's quite good," she conceded. "But you know, Felipe, a piece of furniture made by skilled hands, something crafted with care and love that will be used by a family for decades or even centuries, that is worth far more than expensive wine. Don't you agree?" I couldn't help the smile that spread across my face. "Yes, Senora, I most certainly do." And so it continued throughout the entire meal. I was the celebrated guest, the respected artisan, while they, in their own magnificent home, were reduced to spectators, forced to watch as the matriarch of their family championed the very person they had tried to humiliate and reject. Camilla watched from across the table, her face radiant with love and pride, seeing the man she had fallen for not just accepted, but celebrated. As dessert was being served, Donna Beatrice made her final, decisive move. She looked down the length of the table at her silent, humiliated children, then back at Camilla and me. "It has been a very long time," she said, her voice quiet but carrying immense weight, "since I have had a conversation of such substance at this table. It gives me hope for the future of this family." She turned to face me fully, her expression now businesslike. "Felipe, my late husband, was a collector of antique furniture. Fine pieces from the colonial period, many of them damaged or in need of restoration. They've been sitting in storage, neglected, for nearly 15 years since he passed. No one in this family has the skill or the appreciation to care for them properly." She leaned forward, and I saw the steel beneath the gracious exterior. "I believe I have just found the right person to restore them. We will discuss the details and your compensation tomorrow morning. I'm prepared to be quite generous." My jaw dropped. Camilla gasped. Augusto and Helena just stared in pale, horrified disbelief. She hadn't just approved of me. She hadn't just defended me. She had just given me a commission. a purpose within their world, access to pieces of their family history that they themselves had been too indifferent to care for. The working-class carpenter they had tried to throw out had just been handed the keys to their inheritance. The silence that followed was beautiful. It was the sound of their world turning upside down, the sound of judgment being judged and found wanting. Camilla looked at me with tears of joy streaming down her face. Her man, the one her parents had deemed unworthy, had just been knighted by the Queen herself. I found my voice, humble and overwhelmed. "Señora, I don't know what to say. That is incredibly generous. I would be honored." "Nonsense." She waved a dismissive hand, though her eyes twinkled. "It's not generous, Felipe. It's practical. I'm saving beautiful pieces of history from rotting away in the hands of people who see them only as assets on a balance sheet. You see the soul in the craftsmanship. That is a gift that cannot be taught." Later, as Camilla and I were preparing to leave, Helena made one desperate final attempt. She cornered Donna Beatriz in the grand foyer, her voice a furious hiss. "Mother, you cannot be serious. You are not actually going to give this boy access to Father's collection. Those pieces are worth a fortune. They are part of our family's legacy." Donna Beatriz turned, and the warm grandmother vanished, replaced by a figure of such cold authority that even I felt a chill. "Helena," she said, her voice like ice, "let me be perfectly clear. This family's legacy is not in its furniture or its houses or its bank accounts. This family's legacy is supposed to be in its character, in its ability to recognize worth beyond a price tag. This young man has displayed more integrity, kindness, and genuine ability in one evening than I have seen from this household in years." She looked at Augusto. "He is exactly the kind of person this family needs. He has my complete confidence and my full support. You will treat him with the respect he has earned. Do I make myself absolutely clear?" "Yes, Mother," Helena whispered, her eyes downcast. Augusto just nodded, his face ashen. Donna Beatriz smiled at me then, warm again. "Carlos will give you the address of the storage facility tomorrow, Felipe. Come by at 10. We have work to discuss." That night changed everything. Our wedding 2 years later was a beautiful affair. My in-laws were there, their behavior impeccably polite, if still somewhat stiff. They were terrified of Donna Beatriz, and that fear had transformed into grudging respect as they watched me restore piece after magnificent piece of furniture, bringing their family's history back to life with my own 2 hands. The day after our honeymoon, Donna Beatriz took me to the storage facility. When those massive doors opened and I saw what was inside, I actually stopped breathing for a moment. There were dozens of pieces. A 17th century dining table from Minas Gerais, chairs from the imperial period, cabinets inlaid with mother-of-pearl, a lifetime of work, a calling. I spent the next 40 years of my life as a master restorer, building a reputation that eventually brought me clients from across Brazil and beyond. I opened my own workshop. I trained apprentices. I wrote books on colonial furniture restoration. I became, against all odds and expectations, a respected expert in my field. Camilla and I built a life together filled with love, 3 children, and eventually 6 grandchildren. Her parents eventually came around, especially after our first son was born. It's hard to maintain snobbery when you're holding your grandson. But they never forgot that first night, and neither did I. Donna Beatriz lived to be 93. I had the profound honor of crafting her coffin, a piece of such beauty and craftsmanship that even in death she was surrounded by art. At her funeral, I was asked to speak, and I told the story of that night, of how one woman's ability to see past appearances and recognize character had changed not just my life, but the entire trajectory of a family. Now, sitting here in my workshop at 65, surrounded by the tools of my trade and the smell of wood and varnish, I think about that terrified 19-year-old boy driving to meet his girlfriend's parents. I think about how desperately I had been willing to pretend to be someone else, to hide who I was, to win approval. And I think about how the simple act of being true to myself, of stopping to help a stranger, even when it cost me dearly, had won me everything. My vindication wasn't in their humiliation, though I'll admit there was satisfaction in watching their prejudices exposed. My vindication was in the profound truth that character matters more than class, that skill and integrity and kindness are worth more than any amount of money or status, that the measure of a man isn't in how clean his hands are, but in what he does with them. I still have that ruined white shirt, by the way. Camilla saved it, had it framed along with a photograph from that night. It hangs in our living room, a reminder that sometimes the biggest disasters turn into the greatest blessings. Sometimes the worst first. Impressions lead to the best outcomes, and sometimes, just sometimes, the people who judge you most harshly are the ones who need the lesson most. If I could go back and tell that scared 19-year-old anything, I would tell him this: don't change who you are for anyone. The right people, the ones who matter, will see your worth, and the ones who can't, well, they'll learn, eventually. Even if it takes a wise old woman in a broken-down Mercedes to teach them.